Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, do me a favor, take 1 minute and leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're interested in multifamily and you want to review a sample deal, I got you. You're in luck. All right, we have a special download on our website of a sample deal package. Just go to kasmancapital.com/sample deal. And you'll also join our mailing list to get exclusive tips and investment opportunities if you qualify. Now you go to kasmancapital.com/sample deal to check that out. And it's a great way if you're trying to be a passive investor or if you're looking to be an active investor, it's a great way to start to get a sense of how to put together a package and what to look for in the sample deal. Now, today we're going to be talking to my man, Seth Williams. Now, Seth is a professional land investor with nearly a decade of experience in the commercial real estate banking industry. He is also the founder of retipster.com, one of the most popular real estate blogs out there. So let's welcome to the show, Seth Williams.
Hey, John. How's it going, man? Thanks for having me on your show.
Seth, thank you for coming on. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. As we were talking kind of before we hit the record button, I mean, you've got a very popular blog, which we're going to talk about in a second. But before we get into all of that, why don't you take 30 seconds and give a little bit more details of who you are and what you've done thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm anything like that special. I'm just kind of a regular guy that, when I was finishing up college, I figured out pretty early on that, I didn't want to just work a 8-to-5 job the rest of my life. I didn't know exactly what to do, though. So it took me several years to figure this out. But I started dabbling in different areas of real estate, figured out that a lot of things I wasn't very good at. I was very bad and did not have the resources I needed to flip houses. And I was really terrible at finding deals on rental properties. I was just kind of lost. Eventually, I discovered the land investing niche, which made a lot of things a lot easier. It was way easier to find deals. The properties themselves are very simple to deal with. It was not hard to buy these things for very cheap and resell them with seller financing to create passive income from that. So land offered a lot of benefits. It was really the first thing I was ever able to really find success at. And after the years I spent in that world, I decided to start a blog at retipster.com. The reason I started that was because there was a lot of difficult things I had to just find my way through. Nobody was gonna, hand me the answers. And I realized there's kind of a lot I can offer people just in terms of helping them out. Like for people who were stuck on the same things I was stuck on, I want to make it a little easier for them. So I put together just tons and tons, hundreds of these free blog posts and really detailed video tutorials and reviews and things like that. And that's kind of what the site is all about today, anyway. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, right there.
I love it. We're going to dive into all of that. Let's start with the land investing. And before we even jump in there, I want to talk about the stuff you did that didn't work. So you talked about you tried flipping, you tried to find deals for rentals and some other things. Talk a little bit more about some of the strategies and maybe some of the challenges that you faced in those areas.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I don't know that I'm qualified to give any helpful advice, but the things that I was trying to do, keep in mind, this was back in 2006. And I don't know if you recall what things were like back then, but prices were pretty high, kind of like they are today. It was really hard to find deals in the open market. And I spent hundreds of hours trying to look on the MLS and find deals that would make sense, where I could buy them at a low price, fix them up a little bit, and then resell them for a profit. And no matter how I sliced it, I was going to have to go into a lot of debt. I was going to have to race against the clock. I was going to have to coordinate with contractors. And I mean, everything about it was working against me. I didn't know how to find deals in the first place. Even if I did, I didn't have the means to borrow the money. I didn't know what I was doing. It was bad. And it was really frustrating to me because I knew people who were doing this. It's not like it can't be done. It's just that I don't know what I'm doing. And, basically, I mean, the margins were so thin and you kind of just have your ducks in a row and know how the business works. And I wasn't there. And I had spent a lot of time trying to look for rental property deals as well. But again, prices were just crazy high. And part of what my problem was that, I was looking on just the MLS, like properties that were publicly listed. These are listed by people who cared about getting full market value for their property. Like they weren't just going to be apathetic and sell out for nothing. And I needed to figure out where and how to find those people. And it wasn't until I discovered direct mail, and not just direct mail, but specifically where and how to get the right kinds of lists with the right kinds of property owners who, for one reason or another, either they couldn't afford their property or they didn't care about it, or maybe they inherited it. It was just a matter of finding these people where they were and giving them a very big, easy button saying, hey, I see you own this property. Maybe you have delinquent taxes. Maybe there's some other issue with it. And rather than you trying to mess around with trying to pay those taxes or sell it yourself, I'll give you a very little amount of money for it and you can just walk away. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people did not accept those offers, but a few of them did. And that's all it really took to find deals that had massive profit margins. And, it was a very repeatable system. So that was a huge discovery for me. And really just not knowing where those back alleys were and how to find those really unlimited sources of free real estate equity. That was what was kind of causing me to stall and not know what I was doing for so long.
So when you started figuring out that strategy and figuring out how to find it, finding the list and all that, what kind of marketing were you doing to find those buyers or sellers, I should say, those homeowners, and, start reaching out to them?
Yeah. It's kind of gone through several different iterations over the years, but when I first started out, I had heard about this thing called, well, it goes by a few different names, but I call it the delinquent tax list. And it's basically a list that every single county in the US has. And it's just a list of all the people who are currently back due on their property taxes. And the reason I know every county has this list is because every county needs some way to track who is current and who is past due on their taxes. It's just as simple as that. And it's just a matter of calling the county and saying, hey, can I get this list from you? And one of the several challenges in that process is that a lot of people that you will call at the county have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you're not talking to the right person, or they'll mistake what you're asking for as the tax sale list. And that's a different thing. That's not what we're talking about. That's the list of properties that have already been seized by the county and they're about to auction them off. And what we're looking for is the properties that are still owned by each private owner, but they have delinquent taxes. And if they don't pay them soon, then they will be seized by the county. So, and that's the other thing is, even if they do know what you're talking about, they may not know how to generate this list for you. Usually there's just one or two people in the entire county office who understand how to do that. It's usually in the IT department. So it's always there. It's just a matter of whether or not you can communicate what you want, whether they understand what you mean, and whether they even have the means to generate this list for you. So but the nice thing about this list is that if you can get it, and if you can put together a very simple mailing solicitation, you can either send like some people call it a neutral letter. In my case, it was just a double-sided yellow postcard just saying, hey, look, I see that you own property in this county. I'm looking to buy property in this county. Give me a call. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. And it was very, very, very effective at getting a lot of people to call me. And funny thing was, like, in a lot of cases, I wasn't even picking up the phone. I just had a 2-minute long voicemail greeting that they had to listen to. And if they hung around for 2 minutes and listened to the beep, they could leave their message and then I'd call them back. And so it was really just a matter of knowing where to find these people that really, they were highly motivated sellers. They wanted to get out from under this property. And so that's one way to do it. You can also get lists from different data services like Data Tree is the one that we're using right now. And there's another one called Agent Pro 24/7 that I've used in the past. There's a number of others out there too. But the difference with these data services is that you're basically paying a monthly subscription for it. And usually you have to pay per record that you download. But the nice thing is, it's way easier to get the lists, and it's way more organized. It eliminates a lot of wrinkles. One downside, though, is that you can't typically sort by this delinquent tax status. So you can't do that, but you can get very specific types of property owners on that list. Like in my case, I'm looking for vacant landowners.
Mhm.
So I mean, I can specify I want people who own vacant land properties of this size with this zoning. I want them to live outside of the county that the property is in. I want the market values to be somewhere in this range. So there's all kinds of ways you can specify it. And usually that ends up being fairly effective as well if you get really specific about the kinds of property owners you want on that list. Um, but
No,
yeah,
so that's
there's
great. So basically, you're getting this list. I mean, if you can get it directly from the county, that's going to be a great list that you can play around with. But there's other resources. You mentioned Data Tree, you mentioned Agent Pro 24/7, and
yeah,
these lists are really for the county. So they will include vacant land as well as like single family properties and other property types as
yep,
well.
yep,
Awesome.
absolutely, pretty much. And I will say, not every county is going to be up to date or even available in these
Yeah.
systems. Usually, I've found that like of the 3,300 counties in the US, probably like 2,500 of them will have pretty good, decent, accurate data. So some of them out there, if you're looking like in a super rural county in North Dakota or
Yeah.
some place like that, you may not find the most accurate information, but most of the time it'll be pretty good.
No, it's great tips there. And obviously, working with local government has its own inherent challenges. So,
Yeah,
patience is probably good.
for
Actually,
sure.
taking the time to build some rapport, build relationships, probably go a long way in working with some of these local government officials to get those lists. So, we started talking a little about, how you're finding the deals as far as the land contracts and things like that. As you go into a land deal, especially as you transition from trying to do rentals and flipping, what were some of the key differences in investing in land versus investing in kind of a house or a physical asset or physical property, I should say?
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of differences, and most of them are very nice, good differences. Probably first and foremost is that land. I won't tell you it's like completely hassle free because there are a few headaches that come into play, but for the most part, it is much, much simpler than a house. Because land is essentially, it's kind of a boring type of property. I mean, it's just dirt. It just sits there. Nothing happens to it. You don't have to worry about tenants or things falling apart or things getting broken or stolen or destroyed. So there's a lot of advantages there just in terms of like simplification. However, there are, I mean, depending on what part of the country you're looking in, there are some things that will come into play, like, for example, wetlands.
Mm.
Say if the property is in a swamp or something like that, you can usually figure out those answers before you buy it. But that's one of those things where, like with a house, you don't even think about that. Like you're not going to build a house in a swamp. So certain obstacles have already been overcome just because there's a house there. Also, finding the location, again, this is almost always pretty doable. But like with a house, you just type the address into Google Maps and you'll find it. With land, a lot of times there literally is no physical address for it. The county doesn't have a registered address on site yet, so you have to understand where and how to find the parcel map of the property. Which again, with a service like DataTree or Agent Pro, most of the time you'll be able to find this pretty easily, or even at the county level for free. So there's just sort of different avenues you have to understand where and how to get the information. But also, I'll tell you, like the first few years I was working the land business, I used to always physically drive out and visit my land properties before I bought them. But I haven't done that in years. Like this past year, I've been working in Washington and Colorado. I've never been to Washington State. I have been to Colorado, but not to see my property. So it's one of those things where because it's land and because you can usually answer most of your questions on Google Earth and other avenues, and can also like hire somebody to just drive by the property and snap a few pictures for you and send them back. A lot of the headaches, like physically having to go visit the property and property management and all that stuff, is just not even part of the picture. You don't have to worry about that.
No, I love that too. To your point about not having to physically go out there. I mean, it's not like you're going to go out and start inspecting the soil and doing different tests and all that kind of stuff. So if you can make sure the land is what it says it is, size wise, make sure maybe your neighbors are, what they're supposed to be doing, get a
Hmm.
sense of the area.
Yeah.
That's probably the bulk of what you want to do. So yeah, it probably doesn't require as much of a physical inspection being there yourself. So that makes a
Hmm.
ton of sense. Let's talk about this blog, right? RE Tipster, definitely one of the biggest blogs out there in the real estate space. You have a ton of content, a lot of great information there. What sparked you to start this in the first place?
Yeah. So, you know, the whole idea of blogs, I didn't get it for the longest time. I didn't know why anybody read blogs. It just seemed like kind of a, waste of time. But it was back in 2012 when I discovered another blogger and subsequently several other bloggers after that. But it all started with a guy named Pat Flynn, who runs a website called smartpassiveincome.com and has nothing to do with real estate. But I just saw what he was doing for his audience. He was like really just giving away super valuable educational content, like videos and downloads and stuff that like really could change your life and help you make a lot of money if you put it to use. But like he wasn't charging anything for it. It was all just free. He was just giving it away. And I was blown away by that. And he also used to publish these things called income reports where he would show how much money he was making from his blog. And like he was making a lot of money. And I was just like, how is this happening? Like, how is he giving stuff away and yet still making money from this? But he was able to make it work. And uh, again, like shortly after that, I found a lot of other bloggers and YouTubers who were doing a similar thing. And I knew there were other people doing real estate investing blogs, but it's not that they were, I don't want to say they were like bad or anything like that, but I didn't see anybody doing it to the level that Pat Flynn was doing it with his audience. And I thought, I think I could actually do that maybe. Like if I honed my skills and figured out how to do this stuff, like I could actually do this. And so he was kind of my original inspiration. And I really liked the fact that I never felt like I was being sold to when I was on his site. I never felt like he was bragging or anything like that.
Mhm.
He was just very down to earth. And I'm a terrible salesman. And I've just that's always been something that I thought was like a disability of mine. But when I saw that he was able to, thrive without really selling, it's like awesome. I got to do this. So it's really just been sort of a labor of love and putting together lots of information that I wish I would have had when I was getting started and trying to like really the goal with every blog post I put out there is I want the reader to walk away with their life changed in one way or another. Like they should have a new idea or a new concept that they never thought was possible before. And granted, I mean, not everything is going to change everybody's life all the time. Like some people just don't care about certain subjects. So, it's whatever. They're not going to care about that thing I just published. But for those who do care about that, like it needs to really make an impact and not just be noise because there is tons of noise on the internet. And this has to be a lot more than that. So, yeah.
So Seth, how do you do that? How do you make sure that the content you're creating is life changing or at a minimum is great value that has real impact versus just being noise?
Yeah. I think for me, it sort of starts first of all with just knowing that that's my intent. Like before I start doing anything, I know that my goal is to change somebody's life. Like it's just as simple as that. A lot of people, that's not their goal. Like they're literally just doing it so they can publish something in, have their thing show up in somebody's feed. And when people click through, it's like, okay, whatever. But just knowing that like that's a huge part of why I'm doing this is to change lives is kind of number one. And another thing that it seems kind of counterintuitive, but um, is basically to not see your readers as like dollar signs. Like some people, the reason they do this is very simply to somehow make money from it. And it's very obvious by the stuff they put out. Like it's not that helpful. It's just full of plugs. Like when they review something, they just purely talk about how awesome it is and totally gloss over its shortcomings and that kind of thing. And it's basically whenever I put stuff out there, I go out of my way to talk about stuff that is free. It's not going to make me money at all. Like I'm just talking about it because it's helpful. It's literally what I use. I know it's good, and that's why I'm able to recommend it. And that's another big part of it too, is just building trust and showing people that like like I care about you, like I'm going to recommend stuff to you because it's the same thing I would recommend to a close friend or a family member. Like, I'm not going to tell you to do something that's not in your best interest. And I think people, especially people that have sort of followed the blog for a long time, they've just come to expect that. And that's good. Like, I want them to expect that. I want them to, every time they click on anything on my site, know that I can trust this. If there's something that's not great about it, Seth's going to tell me that. Um, and if it is making him money, he's going to tell me that too. He's not going to like hide that or something. So really it's about kind of transparency, and just being a helpful person first. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's certainly ways that we monetize stuff, but even then, like, I'm never going to talk about something that is garbage or something that I don't have personal experience with in some way, shape, or form. And believe me, I get tons of emails from people who want me to do that, and I don't. So it's kind of just having standards and sticking to them.
No, I love it. Trustworthiness, transparency, having those things allows you to build the trust and build an audience and start to gain followers. Let's talk a little bit more about that as well, right? So you're pumping out great content. I kind of want to get into how you've been able to both grow the blog. It's been like 7 years, right? So you've been doing this
Yeah.
thing for, I mean, in the blog world, that's a pretty consistent time frame. I mean, many
Yeah, it is pretty long.
platforms kind of come and go, and you've been doing this for 7 years. So can you talk about both how you've been able to stay consistent doing it and the amount of content you're putting out right now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. It is not easy. I'll tell you that. It's something that, I'm sure everybody can relate to this. Like, there are some weeks that are just nuts. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You just don't have time to hit it all, especially writing content for, especially when you're starting out and like nobody's even reading it. You're just talking to nobody for the most part. That's probably the hardest stretch for me. It was like the first solid year. I mean, there were a few people interacting with it here and there, but a lot of the time it just felt like, is this just pointless? Is this just a, fruitless exercise? Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest period. Once people actually start interacting with you and like responding to you, and you get emails from people who say their lives are changed, it gets a lot easier from a motivation standpoint. But even like the time constraints, I mean, to make really good, like, life-changing content is very, very time consuming. Like, it takes a long time. Not always, but that's sort of to be expected. Is like, it's pretty normal for me when I write a blog post to spend, I mean, especially if there's a video in there, to spend like 8 to 10 solid hours doing that one piece of content. And yeah, and I think part of the reason I've been able to do that for so long is because I really love this stuff. Like, it is really, really fun to me. I cannot wait to get started working in the morning. And if I hated this, or if I wasn't on fire about it, I don't think I would have lasted, honestly. And blogging is not something that everybody enjoys doing. And I didn't even think I'd enjoy it either until I started doing it and realizing, like, I sort of have a knack for this. But for, to the same point, like, you could do videos instead, or you could do podcasting, that kind of thing. So it's not like you have to type out stuff all day long, but I think it's a matter of just finding what you really come alive doing, and finding an audience to help, and doing it that way.
So you said 8 to 10 hours to do one quality piece of content. How
Yeah.
much are you putting out on on a monthly basis?
Yeah, it's usually like one new blog post a week. And there are some ways that I've been able to kind of, especially now, like, as the blog has grown, like, there's tons of things I have to tend to that aren't just purely content creation. Um, I've got a couple employees now, and there's things that they have to do, and I have to stay in communication with them. And but I will say, since we've started our podcast episodes take more like, I'd say, a couple hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours to do one of those. It's just a totally different kind of content that speaks to a
Mhm.
different audience, or a different medium to get the message across. So that's kind of helped from a time standpoint, but also uh, really just outsourcing stuff, finding other writers. And that's actually been a pretty hard thing, because it's not hard to find other people who will write stuff for you, but it is very hard to find people who will write things to my standards, to spend the same kind of energy that I would put into it. So, I've taken lots of guest posts and gotten submissions from people that have never made it to the blog just because
Yeah.
it's not good enough, frankly. So it's hard to find the people that will really care about it enough. Which, when you do, it definitely helps spread out the workload a little bit, just in terms of getting other people to contribute. Um, so that's helped too, and also really just outsourcing stuff to, like, for example, I don't edit my podcast episodes. If I did, it would take me way longer to get those things done. Um, and I'm actually pretty bad at that, honestly, outsourcing stuff. Like, I should probably have somebody else editing every piece of blog content that goes on my blog, but I'm currently doing that. And it's actually it drains a lot of energy from me. And so that's, I don't have this nailed down perfectly, but that's another example of something that I could be doing that would help
Yeah.
out with my, with my time constraints.
So Seth, I mean, there's so much here, and I really, I feel like I could talk to you another 3 hours and
Yeah.
still feel like I don't run, I would still have more questions.
Mhm.
But there are a few things, right? I'm trying to think about our listeners right now. So I want to hit on a couple things you said. Going back to the 8 to 10 hours to create one piece of content, someone
Mhm.
listening may have like just closed their laptop as they were working on a blog, right? And just
Yes.
gave up.
Mhm.
Walk me through what exactly are you doing that 8 to 10 hours? I mean, I'm assuming it's not all writing, so there's some research. But walk us through your
Mhm.
process to create a piece of content like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, um, an interesting thing about me, I actually hate reading. Like, unless I am intensely interested in the subject matter, like, I'm not somebody who just reads books for fun, which is kind of ironic because I'm writing stuff all day and I'm expecting other people to read what what I write. Um, but part of the insight that that's given me is realizing that, like, if all I'm ever going to do is just write stuff out and that's it, like, I can safely expect a lot of people to never come to this website because they don't like reading either. So that's part of why really early on I introduced video into the process. It's a very effective way to teach people things, to show people on my computer screen what I'm doing, how to use different software and services, and really just to, be human and just talk to people and show 'em my personality and that I'm kind of like them in a lot of ways. So video is really what makes a lot of that stuff take longer, because just shooting the video, where I'm basically saying a lot of the same stuff the blog post
Right.
says, and then of course, if I want the video to be super fancy, there's editing work that goes into that. Sometimes you have to reshoot the video. It's honestly, it's video is probably the biggest hassle ever in terms of what I do. But I know a good video can go a long, long way. I mean, I've got a few videos that have been seen, like, over a couple 100,000 times. So, like, I know
Wow.
it's impacting and it's reaching a lot of people. So I think it's always worth doing, but it's kind of one of those things, like, say if you didn't want to do video, but you would rather just verbally explain things and nobody ever has to see your face. You don't have to worry about lighting or anything like that. Like, that would be one way to significantly shorten the time that goes into it. Say if I did a written blog post and then, like, read it, like like included an audio version of that. I mean, that would probably take, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, something like that. Um, but yeah, it's really, I mean, what it boils down to, and I wish there was a way I could, like, give you a trick so this didn't have to happen. But I mean, really, when you think about how do you really make an impact, how do you answer all of a person's questions or really make a solid case for, you know, you woke up this morning, now you can do these new things differently as a result of what you've read here, and your life will never be different. Like, it's not something you can get cheaply. Like, it's going to cost you something to, give that kind of solution to somebody. And that's why people charge thousands of dollars for courses, is because
Yep.
it's really time consuming to make this stuff. But that's another reason why part of what we do is so uncommon, because it's just very rare that people will give away everything like this and not ask for anything for it, and really just trust that, you know, this will build loyalty in one way or another. Maybe somebody will buy through an affiliate link at some point, or buy one of the few one-off products we sell on the site. And it really has worked, honestly. I'm sure if we were charging tons of money for everything, we'd probably be making a lot more money. But part of what I love about this kind of business model is that, it happens very organically. Like, almost never am I out there trying to convince anybody to buy anything. Like I don't have to make a big sales push for any reason. Like it just kind of happens. Like the money comes in, um, which is really, really cool. Like I love that part of it.
Oh, I love it too, right? Because when you give that kind of content, you give that value to people. It's kind of like that Gary V, jab, 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 right
Mhm.
hook strategy.
Yeah.
And it's not even looking for the right hook in this situation. You're giving away stuff, but sometimes you realize, hey, there's probably something more that people need that probably needs to be either be monetized or we have to charge for because of maybe some expenses we're going to take on.
Mhm.
And that's where it makes sense. But creating the content, giving it away for free, helping so many people, I think it comes through in where you started because you mentioned that you're coming from a place of saying, how can I impact someone's life? How can I change someone's life by reading this post that I'm about to create? And I
Mhm.
think if you're coming from that mindset, you're going to be creating some great content that allows you to grow. So kudos to all that and then building it up. I want to drill down one more time on the content though, just because it is such a core component to anything, whether it's a blog, a podcast, anything that someone's looking to create to get their name out there. Do you have like a content calendar? Do you have ideas that spark? How do you initiate that content creation process, especially if you're pumping out, again, a new piece of content almost every week and
Mhm.
doing this for 7 years? How do you kind of stay on track and figure out what in the heck you're going to talk about in the first place?
Yeah, when I first considered making a blog, I had a very similar question. Like, what do you talk about? Like, what if the ideas just stop one day? Like, is it all done? And but yeah, it is one of those things where if you're staying active in the business and if you are constantly engaging with your audience and trying to figure out, like, okay, what are you struggling with right now? Like, what's keeping you up at night? Like, what tempts you to quit this business? Like, really just getting an idea for like what are the biggest struggles that people go through. And when you're starting out, like it's pretty easy because like I know what I struggled with. Like I know the things that were just horrendously difficult and made me, just maybe want to quit. So it's really just a matter of being very in tune with that kind of stuff. I've got several giant lists that I keep in my little iPhone notes app that just a running list of like if you ever forget, if you ever can't think about what to talk about, here you go. And there's just no shortage. Like I could do this for probably 100 years once a week, and I don't think I'd even come close to running out of stuff. It's
So did you
it's
just write
really
like Monday morning, or I mean, what's your process? You just sit down and write when you get inspired, or do you have like a set time or day
yeah.
to start writing?
It's a little bit of both. It sort of depends on the day, like how busy I am that day, if I have
Yeah.
other meetings and stuff scheduled. But really, it's whenever I have downtime or whenever I guess, have time that I can devote to writing stuff out long form. That's really when I do it. And um, we're usually scheduled out like at least a couple months. So like the stuff I'm working on a review right now, and it's not going to go live for like another 2 months. So um, and that's pretty normal. That there
Mhm.
have been some times in the past where it's like, oh, I got to get this done. It's got I got to be done by tomorrow, that kind of thing. But um, yeah, it's just a matter of sort of keeping the list full. And if that's not full, that just means either you're not doing the stuff yourself, so you don't know, or uh, or you need to, I guess, be more in touch with people in the space who are doing the same thing. And you can do this. Like I've got an autoresponder email that goes out to everybody who signs up for my email list, just asking them, what are you struggling with right now? Reply to this email and tell me. So they can always tell me that. Hanging out in like free forums online, I mean, there is just a ton of insight you can get. It's really not that hard. You just kind of have to be paying attention. And that kind of goes back to the enjoyment factor. Like, if you really enjoy this stuff, it's not going to be hard to get this inspiration. It's just a matter of hanging out in the places where you'd be hanging out anyway and keeping track of what those insights are.
Man, great tips you just gave. First and foremost, keeping a running list. So when you
Yeah.
get inspired, you have an idea, just have a list that you can go to and just start writing. But you gave two other ones. reach out to people. I mean, if you have any kind of email list, I mean, obviously if you're creating content, you should have some way of engaging with the people who are consuming that content. Make sure you respond to them and ask them, what are you struggling with? That's a great way to get ideas for content. The other thing is hanging out in forums. So in this instance, we're talking real estate. So there's different real estate forums, there's different platforms, but find out what common questions people are asking. What are they struggling with? And then create content that answers those questions. So really great tips there. 3 strong tips to help anyone who's creating content come up with ideas, stay fresh, and then also staying connected to people, talking to investors, agents, brokers, lenders, just other professionals in the space, understanding the things they're going through, the challenges they're facing, the landscape. That's going to be other great ways to come up with ideas to create content. So love the information you just provided right there. I want to go to a couple more things where we hit our bullseye round. One, we've talked about you've been doing this for 7 years. Somebody who's listening right now, maybe they just started a blog, maybe they're thinking about starting a blog. What advice would you give them? It's the end of 2019, going into 2020. What advice would you give someone starting a blog to see success going forward?
Yeah, I would say, man, probably the first thing that comes to mind is like, get off your blog. Like, don't just spend all of your time in a vacuum doing content just for your site. Because, um, I mean, I think if that's literally all you ever did, and if you were doing really amazing, epic content, like in time, like search engines and stuff will probably pick up on that. But a way to get there a lot faster is to meet people where they are. Like go to like Bigger Pockets forums, that kind of thing, and um, and don't just don't do it with the intent to be self promotional. Like just forget about yourself for a second and really help a person. Like really find out what they're stuck on. Maybe find somebody who's stuck on something that you were stuck on at one point, and like just serve them up an answer that changes their life. Almost like put together a blog post just for a forum, and answer somebody. And that was what I did for at least a solid year, probably longer than that, on Bigger Pockets actually. And um, I mean, part of why I was able to do that was because nobody was reading my blog yet, and nobody was asking questions or anything. So I just had time to devote to that. And every spare second I had, I tried to go out there and really just help people. And over time, that kind of made a name for me, I guess, just in terms of being one who helps for free and doesn't just throw mildly helpful things out there, but like actually solves the problem right there so that somebody can get past that. And just things like if you include the link to your blog in your forum signature or something like that, if you're helpful enough, like people will start to follow you just because you're that instrumental in their life, and they will seek you out. Like they'll find you wherever you are, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or you have your own blog or YouTube channel, whatever it is. Like when you're helpful enough, people find where you're at and start building your following and that kind of thing.
All right, last one, then we're going to bullseye around. I know this is we're running a little long, but this is just great stuff.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing that someone can do to really grow the following? You talked about, kind of getting off of your website, going into, in this case, the Bigger Pockets and posting there. Is there anything from an SEO standpoint, guest posting, if there's one thing that you would hang your hat on to say, hey, do this, double down on it to really drive more traffic and drive more engagement with your blog, what would that advice be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that the answer is going to be the same for everybody. I think when you're just starting out and like when I was first starting out, I had more time then than I do now to do this kind of stuff, but it was just a matter of first of all finding what works. So that meant like play around on every social media platform, like see if that gets traction anywhere, or do people click through? Are you connecting with people? Try making a YouTube video, try being a guest contributor somewhere, try to get on somebody's podcast, like try as many things as you can. And once you've tried a good number of things, figure out which one of those things actually produced some kind of result. And it's kind of like this 80-20 principle, if you're familiar with that, where,
Hmm.
80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts. And once you sort of know what works, or at least have a vague idea, you can start doubling down on that stuff. Because when you do it all, a lot of it's going to be waste. There's no way around that. But once you actually have that data and you know what is and what's not working, you can sort of decide where your time is best spent. So, that was kind of what I did. Was I just spent a lot of time doing a bunch of stuff. And like, for example, the guest contributing thing, I used to write for Bigger Pockets and a handful of other websites out there. And when I was first getting started, like, it definitely made an impact. Like, it wasn't a waste of time, but I also found probably like a couple years into it that, like, I kind of hit this plateau where, like, it wasn't doing a whole lot more for me. It's not like waves of people were discovering me as a result of that.
Right.
And so, and I got busy and I just stopped doing it, and found other things that ended up being more helpful. So I think it will sort of change as you continue to grow your platform, but it's just a matter of like, I usually spend probably, I don't know, 10 to 20% of my time just exploring other things I've never done before, like maybe doing a guest YouTube video for somebody else's YouTube channel. There's all kinds of different things you can do, and you can figure out those options just by paying attention to what others are doing in your space. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
Yeah, no, you did. I love it. Just play around with it. And then I think one of the things that helped was guest posting and a guest YouTube video, which is not something I even would have thought of. So it's a great idea there, but figuring out ways to, really grow your audience. I think the theme that I hear in those answers is figure out a way to engage where there's already an existing audience who's looking for the kind of content or the kind of answers that you're providing.
yeah.
Engage on that platform, and then by providing great value there, some of those folks will naturally kind of transition over to your website or to your podcast or whatever your platform is. So find a platform that already has a built-in audience, give great value there, and then make yourself discoverable by, again, if it's a guest post, you're going to have that in the byline, you're going to have your email address to your website. If you're on Bigger Pockets, don't be cheap, pay for the premium account or the pro, and whichever one it is that allows you to put your signature in there. So if you're answering questions, people can then click on your website and go to it. If you're doing Medium, if you're doing video podcasting, whatever, make sure that you have some avenue where folks can find you and come back and start to build your network there. So I think it's phenomenal tips and really appreciate it. All right, ready to transition to our bullseye round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, Seth, what is the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year?
Yeah, so in the last year, one that I've referred to a lot and given to a lot of people is called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Have you heard of that book, or have you read it?
I just read it. Yeah, I read it. Yeah. I read it about 2 months ago. It's a great book.
Yeah, totally. So that's the one. It's a great book.
Absolutely. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Yeah, so I've got a couple I can throw your way. So one of them, if you are interested in getting started in the land business, and it actually applies to most real estate businesses, but I wrote it specifically for land investors. There's a sort of an ebook e-guide I put together with links to tons of helpful stuff. It's called The Land Investor's Guide to Getting Started, and you can check it out at retipster.com/getting started guide. And there's also another one that kind of details the entire business model, really, of how to do a land flipping business, kind of like I do. And that is at landflippinglifecycle.com. That'll bring you right there.
Awesome. Yeah. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
Yeah, tons of stuff, really, but I think a lot of the stuff I've sort of talked about, like just in terms of like when you're trying to grow an audience and when you're just getting started and not many people know about you, just understanding how to try a lot of different things and zero in on the things that actually work. That's a big part. And then like in the real estate investing side of things, just understanding where and how to find motivated sellers was an absolute game changer for me. Like everything got immensely easier once I figured out how to do that. And once you know an endless supply of incredible deals you can buy at like 10 to 30% of market value, it's like there's a lot you can do with that. So that was another major thing.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew 12 months ago?
Man, I wish I knew how long it takes to develop a new website or develop new aspects of a website. I've been trying to build out new sections of retipster.com, like a section for a bunch of different free calculators and another section with, free downloads and stuff. And I mean, even when you're working with amazing people, it just takes forever. It's kind of like working with general contractors or builders. Like you're quoted one timeline, but it's like, just assume it's going to take twice as long as that. And there's going to be a bunch of complications along the way. So that was one thing I don't think I fully understood, but I understand it now.
What is a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Good question. Probably drinking coffee, I think, is a huge one. Or having some kind of caffeinated boost. But yeah, probably that. And I've got like a pretty set workout routine that, I don't know if that like is directly responsible for staying focused, but just like having that kind of, like, we always do this. Like, we don't just skip. We don't just like sit around all day and wait to get started. It's like, no, there's actually a schedule we're following here. And that's helping a lot too.
What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious about. Good question. I don't know, man. That's a good question. I think I'm sort of curious about what it would look like to have some sort of a live event of sorts, not like a paid money-making thing necessarily, but just like a whether it's like some kind of a meetup or some sort of a community in-person gathering of people who have followed retipster.com for a long time. It's kind of like when I've been doing this for so long, a lot of this happens like just on my own. Like, I'm plugging away in my office. I don't see people face to face a whole lot. It would be really cool to actually like meet people in person that have actually been following what I've been doing for so long. So I guess I'm curious as to what that would be like.
Well, I'm sure you'd be great at it if you set something up here.
Yeah.
Give me the best place to grab a bite. I know you're out in Grand Rapids, so give me the best place to grab a bite out there.
There's a lot of good options here, but the place that I always go is a place called the Real Food Cafe in Grand Rapids. And if you're from Grand Rapids, there's a good chance you know what that is, but I don't think it exists anywhere else outside of this city. No.
Love it. All right, Seth, we've talked about retipster.com. What is the easiest way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much everywhere on every social media platform. Usually just under retipster or retipster Seth or something like that. You can also go to retipster.com, scroll all the way to the bottom and click on the contact link. It's kind of hidden. It used to be a lot more prominent, but you can always shoot me an email that way too.
Well, I will tell you, Seth, that's how I got in touch with you. And one thing I love that I haven't seen many places is before you hit that contact button, there's a drop-down menu of frequently asked questions, basically, where you help direct people to get the answers that they're looking for prior to actually having to engage in an actual email exchange. So I love that you actually try to help people say, hey, before you send this email, check this and look at that, and here's some other information, but just try to make it easy on everybody. So really appreciate that. Seth, I loved our time today. You gave great information, not just on land investing and how you got started. And I appreciated your candor and recognizing that, starting out, you weren't really the best flipper or didn't have the resources to get in on that level, but figured out land investing was a great avenue. Anyone who's looking to get into land investing, you mentioned that free resource you have on your website, the Land Investor's Guide to Getting Started. So definitely check that out. And then I really love you talking about the blog and just really understanding what it takes to create a blog. I think some folks think that just sit down, you write for 20 minutes and hit publish. And if you're going to create a blog that actually creates great value and has great traction and that can stand the test of time, you're going to have to invest more time into it and have some more thoughts on how you do it. But the big tip that I think, the big insight that I hope our listeners take away is you need to start by giving value, figure out what you can do that can actually help change someone's life and help make an impact on any challenges that they're facing, solve the problem. So you gave some really, really good advice there, and I really appreciate it. And I think that just your overall demeanor and the approach on how you're focused on solving problems is something that I hope our listeners pick up on. And definitely check out RE Tips. There's some great content over there. We look forward to staying close to you and staying in touch. And if you do decide to do that live event, let us know. We'd be happy to share any pointers we have from the events we do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on your show, John. It's good to talk to you.
All right, Seth, take care, man. We'll talk again soon.
All right. See ya.